War kills millions, but at the very same moment, it turns thousands of others into millionaires. In the United States alone, a single war once created 22,000 new millionaires. Not through invention, not through ordinary business, but through the deaths of other human beings. If that makes you uncomfortable, good. Because that discomfort is the doorway to a truth very few people dare to face directly. War, viewed through its coldest lens, is a business, and quite possibly the most profitable business in all of human history. In 2024, the world spent over $2.7 trillion on military expenditure, the highest figure since the end of the Cold War, and the 10th consecutive year of uninterrupted growth. But if you think this is purely a modern phenomenon, you need to travel back more than a century, to World War I, where the real story begins. Net profits from the war in the United States were estimated at $28.5 billion. DuPont, the gunpowder company, watched its revenue surge from $25 million in 1914 to $319 million in 1918, a 12-fold increase in just 4 years. Its stock price climbed from $20 to $1,000 per share. Name one civilian industry that ever grew that fast without a war. But that was only the beginning. The House of Morgan, the legendary J.P. Morgan, financed over $3 billion worth of goods for the Allied forces, even before the United States officially entered the war, and collected a 1% commission on every single Allied procurement transaction. Meanwhile, in Germany, the Krupp dynasty produced artillery, steel, and tanks for 400 years straight, through both world wars, without interruption. It was during this era that a phrase was born, merchants of death. People began to realize certain dynasties, certain corporations did better, far better, when the world was burning, not when the world was at peace. But why war? Why not any other industry? The answer lies in the nature of the customer. A war demands weapons, ammunition, food, uniforms, transportation, and then an entire process of massive reconstruction afterward. Each of those needs is its own separate market, worth billions of dollars. But unlike any ordinary business, the customer here, the government, never haggles when a nation's survival is on the line. No other industry receives unconditional state funding the way defense does. And if a product is guaranteed to always find a buyer, at any price, then who exactly would want to make sure that demand never goes away? By World War II, that logic had been taken to an entirely new level. The United States didn't escape the Great Depression through the New Deal, as many people believe. It escaped primarily through a wartime economy. American GDP nearly doubled in just 5 years, from 1940 to 1945. General Motors retooled its assembly lines to build tanks. Boeing built bombers. And in Germany, Krupp employed over 100,000 forced laborers, prisoners of war and civilians from occupied territories, bringing their labor costs to virtually zero. In other words, war doesn't just create enormous demand. It allows people to strip away everything that cuts into profit: ethics, labor costs, and even the law itself. And that profit doesn't stop at the end of any one war. It generates a cycle. Arms companies fund political campaigns. The politicians they fund, once elected, tend to increase defense budgets. Those budgets flow back as contracts to the very companies that funded them in the first place. The cycle repeats, year after year, until the defense industry becomes one of the most powerful and highest spending lobbying forces in Washington. This is no longer the story of any one particular war. This is a machine, engineered to sustain itself. If you find this kind of perspective worth exploring further, hit subscribe, because what comes next will make you reconsider how this world actually works. So, let me ask you something. Who was the first person to name this machine publicly and most directly? Not a journalist, not a peace activist, but a five-star general, the man who had commanded the largest military force in human history. On January 17, 1961, President Dwight D. Eisenhower delivered his farewell address to the nation. He was the man who coined the term military-industrial complex and warned that it was quietly manipulating national policy. He said something that still stops people cold. Every gun that is made, every warship launched, every rocket fired signifies, in the final sense, a theft from those who hunger and are not fed. The man who had once led the most powerful military on Earth was also its most forceful critic. Defense corporations, he warned, had a direct financial interest in keeping wars going, or at minimum, in keeping military tension alive indefinitely. In other words, peace, for some people, is not something to celebrate. It is a threat to the bottom line. And here, there is a question we cannot avoid. If no one profited from war, would war happen as often as it does? We tend to think wars break out because of hatred, ideology, religion, or territory. But perhaps there is a colder reason, one far less often spoken aloud. War happens in part because it can be priced and sold, just like any other commodity. Yet not everyone who stands inside this industry of death chooses to stay in the dark. There is one story rarely told, but perhaps the most unforgettable in this entire journey. In 1867, Alfred Nobel, a Swedish chemist, invented dynamite, originally for entirely civilian purposes, mining, tunnel construction, infrastructure. But dynamite was quickly turned into a weapon of war and even a tool of terrorism. Then, in 1888, a French newspaper accidentally published his obituary, mistakenly believing he had died, and called him the Merchant of Death, who grew rich by finding ways to kill more people faster. Nobel was still alive, and he read every word they had written about him. He was shaken to his core. In the years that remained of his life, he did something with almost no precedent in the history of business. He directed his entire fortune, built on explosives, to establish the Nobel Peace Prize. One of the most profound acts of atonement any human being has ever made toward their own legacy. Even the man at the very center of the industry of death had not foreseen what he had set in motion. And when he finally understood, he chose to make it right with everything he had. So the story we've just walked through isn't only about DuPont, the House of Morgan, or the Krupp dynasty. It is a reminder that behind every war, there is always a map of interests that very few people want to look at honestly. And the most powerful voice warning us about it belonged not to a peacemaker, but to a general. Nobel's story tells us something else. Even inside the coldest industry in human history, there is still room for a moment of reckoning and for choosing differently, for choosing a more peaceful, more beautiful world. If this video resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss what comes next. Thank you for staying with me all the way to the end. I hope that every time you understand a little more, the world feels a little more worth loving.